Hey guys, welcome to Hughes History as we hit you up with the election of 1884. Guys, it's been 30 years since the Democrats have been in the White House. Are they going to take it this time? Let's take a look at the candidate, the campaign issues, and of course, my favorite, the electoral map and the giddy up for the learning. So let's go get her done right now. So why don't we start with our Republicans, guys, because of course they are the winners from 1880. Of course, James Garfield, bang, bang, goes down, and Chester Arthur takes over. He was, of course, Garfield's vice president. But by 1884, Chester Arthur, not looking so good, not doing so good. Not that healthy. So in terms of the nomination process, he's going to go for it. George Edmunds is going to go for it. He was from Vermont. We also had a calling out to William Sherman. That's right, Sherman's March. He doesn't want the job. Even Robert Todd Lincoln got a shout out. Abraham Lincoln's son, he's the Secretary of War under Garfield and Arthur. He doesn't want the job. So James Blaine is back. That's right, guys. James Blaine's been going for the nomination since I was like this big, little tiny kid. And James Blaine, he's the former Speaker of the House. He represented Maine. He was a U.S. Senator, and he was Secretary of State for 3 presidents. So this guy has a lot of experience. He is what you call a half-breed Republican. I know that sounds offensive, but what it really means is that he was not a stalwart. He wasn't somebody who was in part of that political machinery. He's kind of a reform candidate. So he represents, I guess, the best the Republicans have to put forward, but we're going to find out that he's not so squeaky clean after all. Along for the ride with him, he's going to bring John Logan, and now we have ourselves our Republican ticket. Let's take a look at the Democrats. So the Democrats have a little bit less competition. They're going to pretty much solve their problems by the 3rd or 4th ballot, going with New York governor, former mayor of my hometown, Buffalo, New York, the big man himself, Grover Cleveland. And guys, let's remember that the Democrats haven't won in 30 years. So they're a southern-based party, but they also have a northern constituency in kind of these, urban political machines. Grover Cleveland, though, is pretty squeaky clean. He was opposed by Tammany Hall. He helped break them up. He's against political corruption and political machines in general. So he has a pretty good resume to go up against the Republicans, and who we're going to see with their candidate isn't going to have such a squeaky clean image when it comes to graft and corruption. But that's our candidate, Grover Cleveland. He's going to bring Thomas Hendricks along for the ride with him. And we're not going to talk too much about party platform. I didn't with the Republicans. I'm not doing it with the Democrats because they're pretty indistinguishable. They're both talking about cleaning up the system, expanding American influence. They have some differences a little bit on immigration and tariffs, but for the most part, we're heading ourselves towards a personality contest here. Now, we will mention really quickly, without popping out of the screen and back on, that there's a number of third-party candidates, and one of them in particular, the Prohibition Party. There was 2 Prohibition parties. You think they couldn't get together and agree on one candidate? But out of Kansas, we're going to run a guy by the name of John St. John. And although they're only going to get about 100,000 votes, it really is going to have a big impact in the state of New York. But we also have the Anti-Monopoly Party. There's a Greenback Party. There's an Equal Rights Party. And for the first time, we have a full-time woman campaigning for the office in Belva Ann Lockwood. Now, in 1872, we did have Victoria Woodhull that made a partial run at the White House, but the Equal Rights Party believes in equal suffrage and equal treatment of women, and they're only going to get about 4,000 or 5,000 votes, but you could have voted for them. Of course, not all women could have voted for them because women don't really have the right to vote yet. But I'm getting off track. All right, we have our 2 major candidates, guys, in James Blaine from Maine and our Democratic candidate, Grover Cleveland, the big man. So let's take a look at the campaign, and then I'm getting ready to get to that map. Kindly burn these letters, and Ma, Ma, where's my pa are going to be the heart of this campaign. It's not about political issues. There's not a lot of differences between the 2 candidates, even on fiscal policy. Both of these guys are gold standard candidates. We call Grover Cleveland a bourbon Democrat. He's a fiscal conservative, and that issue will later kind of rip that Democratic Party apart. But the campaign is basically going to be run in a negative fashion on a couple issues. One of them is going to be James Blaine's connections to the railroad companies. Now, James Blaine has a very long history. He's Speaker of the House, he's in the Senate, he was Secretary of State, so he has a lot of connections and a lot of past, and he's run for the Republican nomination before, so there's been charges thrown at him before. One of them stems back to his connections to the Union Pacific Railroad and the Little Rock and Fort Smith Railroad line, where he received about $110,000 in kickbacks for different land grants that he got through Congress, and that was investigated. And during that investigation, he denied all these connections, and up pops the Mulligan letters. There was a clerk that had transferred some of the letters and kept some of the letters, and at the end of these letters, James Blaine was writing, kindly burn these letters because of all of the graft and corruption that was in them. But this is a constant beating of the drum the Democrats are doing against James Blaine, that he's corrupt. You could see the cartoon, the tattoos represent all of his past corruptions, and that's going to split that Republican Party in the North. There's a number of Republicans that are called mugwumps, and these are anti-corruption reformer Republicans that are going to defect to Grover Cleveland, and when we look at the electoral map, you're going to find out they're going to make a huge, huge impact on this election. Now, Grover Cleveland's playing it as he's the cool guy, he's the good guy, and then the dirt comes out on this guy. Grover Cleveland, when he was a lawyer in Buffalo, impregnated a woman by the name of Maria Crofts Halpin. They have an illegitimate child together. Grover Cleveland has her committed, the story is, and then gives the child away to another family and is bankrolling that kid in secret. So his story was that this was a loose woman, that she was sleeping around with his friends, that he slept with her. He was a bachelor. It was indiscretion. She got pregnant. He did the right thing. She committed herself to an asylum, and she's cray-cray, and he takes care of the baby. What a great guy. Now, Maria gave her own account of the story, and it's very much different. She says that Grover Cleveland pursued her, and that after a dinner date, she finally agreed to go out with him, that he basically raped her, and that when she had the child, he committed her against her will to an asylum. There's actually testimony from a doctor from that asylum that says there was nothing wrong with Miss Halpin, that she was completely mentally stable, that he took the baby away from the mother and tried to basically clean this mess up. So literally during the campaign, the Democrats are yelling and screaming at their rallies, kindly burn these letters, and the Republicans are yelling, Ma, Ma, where's my pa? And then really the October surprise, there's always an October surprise, is that the Republicans are giving kind of a meeting. There's a reverend by the name of Samuel Burchard who's giving a speech. James Blaine is there, and the reverend is talking about why people shouldn't defect to the Democratic Party. He says it's the party of rum, Romanism, and rebellion. Well, rum we get, they're the drinkers, right? We get rebellion, right? That's the whole Civil War thing. The Romanism thing is a connection to the Catholic Church. So James Blaine didn't even notice that this was said, but the Democrats sure did, and they're going to hit those urban centers in the Northeast hardcore, saying that the Republicans and James Blaine are anti-Catholics. Most of the immigrants are Irish immigrants, German immigrants, a lot of Catholics, and that's going to turn them away from voting for the Republican Party and throwing their votes again to Grover Cleveland, where they should be voting because they're supposed to be Democrats. So that's going to have an impact on this election as well. So why don't we pull down the big map? Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at why Grover Cleveland's going to be the first Democratic president since 1854, and then we'll call it a day. How about that, kids? Here we go. Get the map. Someone get the map. All right, I'm back, and I brought the map. Here's the map. So you could see, wowzer, what a close election this is. 219 electoral votes for Grover Cleveland, 182 electoral votes for James Blaine. 20 states go for Grover Cleveland, 18 states for James Blaine, and the popular vote's only off by 1 percentage point. It's 49% to 48%. But if you bear with me, we can look at that map and see that solid South is now the solid South for many, many years to come. So the Republicans aren't competing in the South. They're really looking for these swing states back then, which are kind of mid-Atlantic states like New York, Pennsylvania, and some of the swing states we know today, like Ohio. Out west, pretty securely Republican. Northeast, very securely Republican. But those states, like I mentioned, like New York. We could see that New York has 36 electoral votes. This is a very close electoral race. If New York flips, James Blaine is the new president of the United States. So out of more than 1.1 million votes in New York, you want to guess the difference between the two candidates? 1,047 votes. So most historians and political scientists have attributed that to some of the comments made against the Catholic religion by some of Blaine's supporters that turned off a lot of immigrants, and even the prohibition candidates. Generally, Republicans are the prohibition-leaning folks, a little bit more ethical, a little bit more moral, a little bit maybe judgmental on those city folks. So, splitting off a few thousand of those votes to vote for the prohibition candidate, John St. John, that's the dude's name, it's John St. John, is going to make all the difference in the world. So there you go, guys. The Democrats have gone and got it done. They won the White House after 30 years. Hip, hip, hooray for Grover Cleveland. Of course, we all know Grover Cleveland becomes the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms in the White House. I guess you got to watch more videos. We're getting so close, guys. There's only one more that we got to do to finish this playlist. Go down and check the playlist in the description below. Make sure you're subscribed to Hip Hughes History, otherwise you're going to have bad karma, and I am not personally responsible for the effects of that bad karma, so you should probably go and do that. And I always say the same thing at the end of every lecture because I believe it with my teacher heart. Where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons.